So, I want to quickly talk about exercise and long COVID or CFS recovery. So, this is a very controversial topic, as anybody who's part of the CFS community or long COVID, or you've done some research or you've been struggling for a while. The general consensus is that exercise is going to make things worse, and you need to avoid exercise at all costs. And yeah, that's the general viewpoint on exercise. But exercise was really important in my recovery journey. So, briefly, to just share my experience, I started off doing a lot of research on how to recover, and it was all about pacing and cutting out any forms of exertion. And after speaking to a lot of people who'd been struggling with chronic fatigue syndrome for a long time, there's a lot of fear around exercise because people, they push themselves a bit and then they get a worsening of their state, or their condition worsens. And you speak to people on forums about this, and everyone will tell you, or it was like this for me, stay away from exercise because it can make you worse. So there's a lot of fear that if you exercise, you're going to get worse, because that's what happened to some people. And there's some truth to this, and I couldn't just start exercising when I was at my worst. I tried. Eventually, it kind of hit me that a lot of this had to do with my perception of things that were threats. Like, I realized that things had gotten worse for me when I stopped exercising, because I believed that I couldn't exercise and it would make things worse. And I tried that for a couple of months because exercise was leaving me feeling pretty rough. So I trialed a period where I stopped exercising completely, and then a couple months later I wanted to try gradually increase my exercise, and all of a sudden just small things would give me massive symptoms afterwards. And it made me realize that this had to do with what I was perceiving as a threat, and then my body learned from that. And then I did something and I got some symptoms afterwards, and then I did that next time, and I was, now my body was expecting that same response. And then eventually it becomes this learned process where exercise is seen as a threat and your body responds in a certain way. So when I tried to start introducing exercise again, there were very real consequences. I would feel really bad for a couple of days, and it was so confusing. I would be scared, am I going to get worse? So it's a difficult one. It definitely is. But the truth is, I needed to overcome that. If I wanted to recover properly to where I can do anything again, I had to reintroduce exercise, even if it brought on symptoms. But I had to do it in like a gradual way and in a manageable way. So yeah, I wanted to share how I approached that, because I know it can be very confusing, and I didn't know how to go about this at first. So yeah, I'll just share my approach, and you can do what works for you. Maybe, as I said, it's going to be different for everyone. So take this with a grain of salt, and but there are some aspects that I think are really important for everyone to approach in a way that works for them. So let's talk about this. So for me, it started with, when I was like for a couple of months doing no exercise, and I really wanted to, because that was a massive part of my life beforehand. And that was one of the toughest things. That was as part of this illness, that like I felt like I had no life anymore. I couldn't even go out and go for like a half an hour walk or anything. That was way too much. So I started working with a physiotherapist initially, who had some experience working with people with chronic illnesses and trying to help them with rehab and implementing like routines to try and help with recovery. So that was where I first tried approaching exercise again. So before that, I was too scared. I wanted someone to confirm that I could, and then this physio said, let's try. And what helped was that she was very wasn't pushing me. It was like we'd do it in a very gradual process. So anyways, that was like the first taster of it. But the approach we used wasn't really, maybe it worked. Maybe I needed to go through that phase, so we tried with like a 10-minute walk and then like a 5-minute break and stuff. But everything at that time was too structured for me. I wasn't really recovering. It was strict like activity scheduling and pacing, and that wasn't working for me because I couldn't do it. I just couldn't like plan out my entire day and have half an hour rest after any activity. And it was only, and I couldn't do it, and then I would have symptoms, and then I would beat myself up about it, and it was like I was stuck in this cycle for a couple of months. And then eventually, when I just kept on failing at this, I realized that I had to find another way. This strict pacing wasn't going to work with me. So then I did this neuroplasticity brain retraining course, which I'd heard other people had really recovered quite quickly from really severe cases of chronic fatigue syndrome with it. And at first I was quite skeptical, but then I did some more research into it, and I thought, I need to try things. I want to recover, and I realized that, again, it's my belief that is really important here. So if I do this course and I believe that it's not going to work, then it's probably not going to work. But if I really say I'm going to do this course and I'm going to find a way to take something out of this and use it for me, then it'll have a big difference on the impact it has on my health. So anyways, that course was really helpful in overcoming the fear barrier to exercise. So again, implementing it in a very gradual way, but the focus of the course was, so it was for a variety of different issues that people were struggling with. So for some people it is like sensitivity to foods or chemicals or something. So you implement the trigger, and then it's just enough to bring on a little bit of symptoms, and then you notice your reaction to it, and you like reaffirm to yourself that this is not a threat, you're actually safe. So that was like my first introduction to a bit of exercise. So I would, do like 10 jumping jacks to get my heart rate up a bit. And in the past, I would like notice like my breathing, and then like I'd notice some symptoms coming on, and then the thoughts will spiral into, oh no, I've done too much, I'm going to have a crash, I need to rest for like 2 days now or something like that, because that's how you've learned to respond. But now you notice that, and you don't fight that. I think that's an important part, is don't like notice that reaction and then try to get rid of it and be like, no, this is bad, I mustn't have that reaction. Just notice it, let it be there, and then realize that it's okay, you're safe, you can do this, you can bring on a little bit of symptoms and just sit with it. That was important for me, is just sit with it for a bit. So I started doing that, and then, it was difficult at first. It was like, I was scared and I was worried, and I would have symptoms and I would think, what am I doing? Am I doing too much? But I kept on doing it, every day, doing a little bit of exercise, something to raise my heart rate, like 10 jumping jacks, 15 jumping jacks, 20 jumping jacks. And slowly I got comfortable with raising my heart rate a little bit, and I realized, okay, there can be a bit of symptoms, but it's not going to kill me. I'm not like bed bound for a year now. It's not like that. So as I said, do it in a manner that works for you. But that was really important for me, was to overcome that fear barrier. And then from there, I started, this took time, but then I started cycling for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. But it was really important for me to overcome that heart rate fear barrier, because that had been something for me, because early on in my recovery journey, or wasn't really the recovery journey, it was more of the downhill part. To try to recover, some people had spoken about like very strict heart rate monitoring. So never let your heart rate get above a certain point, otherwise you're going to crash. You need to keep it below. And then that implemented these beliefs in me that heart rate above a certain level was dangerous and it was bad for me. And now I needed to undo that. So that was an important part for me. It was like my heart rate can go to 150 and I'm okay. My body can handle this. Yeah, that's just my experience with exercise. And as I said, once I was able to get comfortable with raising my heart rate, but then I could start to, because I'd started before that doing like a 10-minute ride, but like really slow, like it was less intense than going for a walk. But then I built that up to like 20 minutes, and then now with my heart rate, I could go a little bit longer, and eventually I started pushing myself. And this was also, it was very roller coastery, where some days I would cycle up a hill, and then I'd come back and I was like, have I done too much? And maybe for a couple of days I would be convinced that it was a big mistake, and maybe sometimes I pushed myself a bit hard. But it was part of my recovery process that I had to unwind all of these fear-based responses and re-teach my system that we can do this and it's not going to kill us. The system needed to be exposed to these so-called threats that it had learned to undo it. So yeah, that's my experience with exercise, and it really was an important part of getting back to full recovery. Was I really had to put myself in those uncomfortable situations and bring on a certain level of symptoms. It's changing your response to symptoms. So you want symptoms to come as an opportunity. So symptoms arise. It's like, okay, now is the chance to retrain my system. And it's difficult. I remember it was it was tough. It's easy to talk about it on the other side, but it feels very much different when you're in that place where you're having this reaction, this crash. And especially, it depends on what your journey with this illness has been like. But if it's been years of reinforcing these responses as this is a threat, it's a strong reaction, and it takes time to deal with it. But you have to start somewhere, and it can play out in different ways for different people. But for me, it was important to introduce exercise on purpose, raise my heart rate, bring on symptoms. Slowly, there's going to be ups and downs. It can be difficult, it can be scary, it can be confusing, but it was really important for me. And then, as I said, from there, I just kept on building up, and it took time. One day I was going along the process, and I was going for like half an hour walks. And then one day I went for like a 2 hour walk, and it was awesome. And then afterwards, I had this massive reaction. And I was like, shit, what have I done? And then for a week, I didn't do it anymore. So there's times like that. But for me, it was combining the exercise with a lot of other things as well. So I'm going to keep making videos talking about the things, because that's why I say it's a very personal journey, because I can talk about one little aspect, but that doesn't include all of the other things that were really important as well. And to be honest, the most important things for me was more inner work. That was really where things started to change. It wasn't supplements, it wasn't diet. Exercise was important, but it was more the internal reactions to exercise. It wasn't medicine, it wasn't any of that. It was inner work. So meditation was really important for me, like massively important. That was probably one of the biggest factors. Was when I started meditating, when I started looking inwards at my thoughts, at calming my mind, being able to see the unconscious processes going on. It opened up the space. And then emotion work, feeling the fear, the uncomfortable emotions, not running from them. It's all tied together, the symptoms and your emotional reactions and your thoughts. So emotion work and meditation and acceptance and compassion, those were massive. Like resistance is probably one of the biggest factors that was keeping me stuck. Is like, you're having symptoms and you really don't want them to be there, and that's when you really suffer. Once I had been meditating for a while and I was able to sit with the uncomfortable symptoms and accept them and just let them be there and become curious, it's like, what is this symptom? It really changed everything. Honestly, when I was no longer pushing away symptoms, experiences, thoughts, feelings, when I could accept it and be like, whatever wants to be here can be here, that was really like the final barrier. Like that's when things started happening quickly. Like I'd been introducing exercise for a while and it had been up and down and up and down. But once I really started working on that acceptance and not resistance, and if fear wants to be here, fear can be here. And then fear arises and you're like, oh no, like that shouldn't be here. Like now I'm scared. But then it's like, okay, that can be here. Like the fear of the fear can be here. Like you're just making space for whatever needs to be there. So to be honest, that was really the most transformative stuff for me, was the more the inner work, meditation, emotion work. So there's a lot of helpful resources. So I'll make a video on more of that stuff. So this is like an exercise, more focused, but the other stuff was really important as well. And when I first started introducing exercise, it helped. I meditated for like 20 minutes beforehand, and that kind of calmed my nervous system a bit, so that when I went to exercise, I was in a much calmer state and I was more aware. And that's how I first started doing it, was meditate for like 20-30 minutes before going to exercise, and it was really great. Then I'd go for a walk and I wouldn't have this immediate cascade of thoughts and symptoms and this hyper alert fear response kicking in immediately. If I meditated, it calmed my system for a while. So that's something you can try as well. Try some meditation, or anything that gets you out of your head and into your body. There was something I used to do as well where it was called a lymphatic drainage massage. So it really helped when I had really bad brain fog and I couldn't think, and the brain fog got really bad. Then I would do this. I'll put a link in the description to the one I used, and it was like a massage for your face that kind of cleared out some of the, I don't know what it is, like the stuff in your lymphatic system. But what really helped is it took me out of my head and I was feeling the sensations, because sometimes the sensations would be really strong and it would be quite uncomfortable, but I'd really try and feel into it. And afterwards, there would be so much clarity and I could go for a walk and I would just be much more present. So things like that, meditating, getting into your body, breath work, something like that. And then introducing something that's a little bit stressful or scary, like a little bit of exercise. If for you that's a big deal, that's a good way to combine it. So that's my experience. Those are some of the things that helped. As I said, take it in a way that works for you. Don't just listen to what I'm saying. Listen to yourself, listen to your body, apply it to your situation, and try things. Sometimes you're going to do a little bit too much. You're going to have some symptoms. It's okay. It's part of the process. But when you start to work on the inner work, it's not so much a problem when the symptoms appear. But it's difficult as well. Things don't just change like that. I remember for me, it was such a roller coaster, and you just got to keep trying. So I hope this helps.